Welcome to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Join us as we dive into the world of endurance sports, exploring everything from nutrition to training and how these elements shape your everyday life, both on and off the race course. Hosted by Coach Justin, certified run and triathlon coach and owner of Tabula Rasa Racing, along with Coach Katie, a registered dietitian specializing in sports nutrition and owner of Fuel to Run. We're here to share insights and real-world advice to help you thrive on your journey. Here at the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast is where your journey begins.
Welcome to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. This is Coach Katie. This is episode 93. I am introing this episode because we had a little bit of technical difficulties and some of the episode intro that we originally recorded got cut off. So welcome. And I wanted to dive right in. This episode is going to be on the topic of fitness versus durability. So this is episode 93, and we're going to dive right in.
This is a particular topic that I have seen a lot of discussion on recently. We posted a reel on our Instagram feed probably about a couple weeks ago now, and it went absolutely viral. It shot up. It was one of our highest performing reels to date. And there was a lot of commentary that was going on this idea of run frequency, where the reel was about if you're running 3 days a week or less, you're really kind of you're maintaining, you're just the status quo kind of run. If you wanted to see actual improvement, whether that means in performance or durability, you really have to run more than you're not running. So at least a minimum of 4 days. There was a lot of conversation that was going on. It's like, okay, well, yeah, you can make performance gains running 3 days a week. But the idea that was behind this reel was it's not just gains in performance. Can I get faster or can I run longer? Sure, those are still possibilities depending on where you are in your journey. If you're just coming off the couch and you're going to run 3 days a week, sure, you're going to see gains in both endurance and performance. But the real question becomes, the run frequency is going to impact your ability to be durable, to build what we call durability. And the reason that we want durability is because we have seen with working through athletes in our own endurance journey that durability is what allows us to be consistent. And performance comes from consistency. Now, when I say performance, I'm talking about sustained performance, not that, I could go out and I could run, a 4-minute mile. And then once you achieve that, you stop and you're never able to replicate it. What we want sustained performance over time. And that comes from being consistent. And the ability to become consistent comes from your ability to be durable, to build this durability, a sound foundation in which you can overlay performance on top of. Because if you try to overlay performance on a cracked foundation, all you're going to get increased risk of injury and setbacks and this constant rebuild cycle, which I've talked about before, where you're starting to ramp up and then all of a sudden you get a setback. And so now you got to start over again. And this cycle will perpetuate itself until you find a way to become durable. And that is many times that is outside of the training plan. So we wanted to come to you this week with a more in-depth conversation on what does it mean to be fit and to have fitness versus what does it mean to be durable. So this is, like I said, this is episode 93. So we're going to jump right on in. So Katie, you want to go ahead and let's share some of your thoughts on starting this conversation.
Yeah, I think going back to that commentary about frequency, I do agree that somebody brand new to running can probably get maybe more fit or improve or have progress with just 3 days a week of running. I think sometimes with these reels or just a general there's a lot more nuance to things. It's not always like this is the rule for every single person. But I agree. I think like beyond maybe just the initial improvement, like I was sort of saying off air, like there's only so much in those 3 days that you can, like once you kind of get to a point in your fitness or in your journey, there's only so much you can kind of add on to 3 days of running. Like you could maybe have one day be like a longer run and you gradually progress that, but maybe one day or the other days are kind of some sort of workout maybe, but at some point you have only so much you can do within those days. Um, and so many things you can kind of tweak before you sort of run out of runway, I guess. And so it almost becomes a natural
Right.
progression to have to add an additional day or two. And that's, I think, where the durability comes in, because I do think some of that, you can do a long run and a couple hard workouts, but I think it's the little things like some of the easier runs in between that, the strength training we'll talk about, but those little things that kind of you do in between the added things that aren't necessarily like another workout that help you to become a little bit more durable. And then the durability in turn will help you be able to continue progressing. Because like you said, if you're just working on just becoming more fit, I think the risk of injury is higher, or you're just not able to kind of continue to progress. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. I think a lot of people want to believe that 3 days a week or 2 days a week is enough to continue to make progress, because they want sort of the easy way out. Like, oh, that's easy.
Yeah.
It's nice to be able to only do 3 days and actually feel like you're going to make some kind of progress. But I'm here to tell you that over some point in time, you're just not going to be able to continue to progress with just 3 days a week. I've been running for 30 years. Like I've trained a lot of people, I've worked with a lot of runners, like you just aren't. And I'm sorry, there's no easy way out, easy way to get, like we've talked about before. There's maybe ways to kind of like temporarily improve fitness, but when it comes to like the long run and making progress year over year and improving year over year, or, month over month, like you're just gonna run out of the ability to do that with just 3 days. And so it takes work. There's no easy, like, this is the formula for the easy way out. And I think, unfortunately, people want that. So they're going to, like, probably argue, oh, we can do this in 2 or 3 days. And I'm here to tell you, of lots of experience, because those are probably newer runners or people who aren't maybe as experienced in running that are saying that. It's just not going to be possible to continue to get better year over year. You prove to me you can do that, and I'll maybe like look at that. But, just to be kind of real with people, it's just, yeah, there's no easy way to only run 3 days a week and get better, or, you're just not going to be able to get more durable. And then over time, your progress is going to slow. So that's kind of where I think
Right.
my thoughts go. I don't know if you have any other like thoughts on that frequency piece particular. I mean, we can kind of move on from there too, but yeah, what
Yeah.
are your thoughts?
Yeah, I do. I see this a lot when I'm working with new athletes. And let's say that I'm working with someone who is going to run their first 10K, and they're kind of coming off of the couch. So really, there's no there's no benchmark that we have to evaluate performance. Performance is just going to be evaluated based on, did you meet or exceed or fall short of the expectations that you had when you went in to the race. So let's say that you run your first 10K and you get it in, whatever time it is. Then you say, oh, that was really, really good. I'm going to continue the same training plan, the same intensity mixture and everything else. And you go and run your second 10K, it is very possible to see a big jump in performance, a big decline in your race time. And so you start to think that these types of gains are linear, that if you just continue to use the same method, that you're always going to see these big jumps in performance. But there comes a time, like you said, where you've now exhausted what I call the newbie performance gains, where you're not going to see that kind of marginal change in race over race. And so it's going to take more and more focused effort in the training in order to generate smaller and smaller performance gains.
Mhm.
If that were the case, then we would see Olympians making still these huge gains, but they train for years to just shave off seconds of,
Right,
their run
absolutely.
times. And so
Yeah.
it proves to you that this is not a linear process. So in order to be able to stack on either more intensity or more volume, you have to become more durable. And what I find with these athletes is that they seem to think that, oh, I'm just going to continue to run at the same frequency. But if I want to get faster, now I'm going to throw on a track Tuesday and all this kind of stuff. And then what they're doing is they load up the intensity thinking that that's going to make them faster and lead to higher performance gains. But they don't have the durability in the muscles and the tendons and joints and everything else to sustain that kind of impact. And what happens is they get hurt like during their training plan. They're just like, oh, well, now I either I can't run any more days because when I ran this number of days, I got hurt. Well, it's not a fact that it's not the factors that I can only run these number of days. How long and what intensity mixture were those runs? If we can distribute that load over more runs, then chances are the body has a chance to absorb that impact and that stress. So, can you run 3 days a week at high volume and high intensity and not get hurt? I I I, I don't know.
Maybe,
It
yeah.
genetics plays a really big
Mhm.
factor in that kind of ability for the body to absorb it.
But
But in my experience, no.
in
You
my
you you
experience
have
too,
to
it's like
spread
then
that
you're
volume over.
like, are you just gonna continue to load each of those days to get better? Like, as you start to realize that your progress is now tapering off and plateauing, like, how are you even if you can handle that genetically, I just think there's a limitation to it, at some point to how much you can kinda load those 3 days to actually, like, improve. I feel like if you're just and this is where I think the difference you have to kinda think about your goal too, the difference between maybe just wanting to maintain fitness, because you don't really care about your performance, but you just want to be generally a healthy, fit person. Because Justin, you sort of brought up this example too of like the sort of typical weekend warrior, the person doing like a lot on like Saturday, Sunday, and then maybe not very much during the week. That also isn't going to get you very far because you can only load up the weekend so much. And um, then you have all these 5 days where maybe you're not doing much, and then your body's kind of like it's just not kind of enough of a stimulus. It's a lot of stimulus all at once and then several days of nothing or very little, like, running or something like that, but that's fine. I mean, if somebody likes to be able to maybe they have a really busy week and they just wanna be able to get out there on the weekend and do some cool stuff, and they wanna sort of maintain their fitness, then that they just enjoy that and they're not really looking to progress or get faster, maybe that works for them, but if someone's sort of arguing that they can do that and continue to, like, progress and, I don't know, be able to do a race or something. I just don't think we may and actually have some sort of outcome that, improvement. I just don't think that's possible. So I think the discussion then also is like, well, what is your goal? Is if you just want to be kind of a fit person and maintain fitness and be able to kind of do a bunch of stuff, like maybe you lift in between or you run and you do other things and you just kind of want to be generally fit, like, or generally kind of just be able to jump into anything and do it, maybe just jump into a race and be able to complete it. Like that's one goal. And that I think you can do off of maybe 2 to 3 days a week. But is your goal to like, I don't know, especially I think of the duration of the race probably also matters a little bit. Like, I'm thinking like a mile race or something. You might be able to do like a 3 days a week and train and be able to do a fast mile. It might depend on what you're doing in between. But as the race gets longer, like a marathon, there's no way. I mean, yes, for your very first marathon, if you're training and you're just completing a marathon, you can do that maybe off of 3 days a week. You might be able to complete it. But at some point, like you just cannot get better in that particular type of race without adding in more days or volume or and spreading it out a little bit throughout the week, because then you do run into the issue of injury because you're loading each day so much. You can only add so much volume to each individual day. So you kind of have to add more days to kind of spread out the load a little bit. So I also think it depends a little bit too, but, on the race, the particular goal someone has, those types of factors. But I think in general, for most people who are trying to progress in a faster time, or they have a goal where they just, they want to, most people who train are training for like a time goal, unless it's maybe like an ultra marathon or something where it's a little bit less of, depending on the type of ultra marathon, like that's more about completing the distance and all of the factors that come into that. But for most, triathlons, road races, people are trying to get faster, right? Like most of us are trying to hit a time goal or a PR or PB or whatever we want to call it. So I think in that instance, durability matters a lot. And also, like, it's hard to build durability and kind of progress and get better with only 2 or 3 days a week of running.
So I want to make this statement and see what you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a great illustration of the difference between fitness and durability, because if we go into a race with just the expectation or the goal of completing a race, really that says to me is that we are just looking to gain enough fitness to complete it within whatever time constraints are present. I mean, there are cutoffs for races and things like that. So all that we're interested in is we're looking for completion within a max time. To me, that is more of, okay, let's build fitness in order to meet this goal. Now, you come to me and you say, I want to finish this race in this time with this type of performance expectation that is sometime below the cutoff. I want to run this at a particular pace. I want to be able to run this in its entirety without any kind of walking intervals. I want to swim this course with this kind of pace, or I want to hold this kind of sustained power during a bike segment. To me, that is where we start talking about performance related issues. And you can only get performance related issues if you have the durability to absorb and sustain the training to get the performance. Without that, you can't see the performance. You can't realize it. Or it's going to be more of a luck of the day, which happens.
Kind of like, because I feel like when people have more, when they're not durable, going to tend to have more setbacks. I mean, generally fitness and progress is never, like we said already, it's not linear, but it's not, it's kind of up and down and up and down. It kind of looks more maybe like this instead of, but people are going to have a lot more like ups and downs, and, like to get to where they want to go is going to, where somebody else who is a little more durable maybe would have an occasional sort of setback, but because they're consistently training even in between, and we'll talk about this a little bit, but even in between their training plans for the race, they're still like consistently putting in work. They're just going to be able to kind of get there, even at the ups and downs. It may look a little bit like this, but they'll get there faster. Whereas somebody who has less durability, maybe like they kind of make some gains and then they like go back almost to square one, and then they kind of, and it's never just taking them forever to kind of get where then they'll never really realize maybe what they're truly capable of, or what they would have been truly able to do, because they can never kind of get there. Like they just can never.
They're always rebuilding.
They're always they're always rebuilding. They're always whether it's a setback like an injury, or it's something like, oh, I've completed my training plan and now I'm going to take 3 months or whatever it is, like 3 weeks, 3 months, whatever, completely off for very minimum. And then, or they're like, I see this a lot where people, they do like their fall race and then they're like, okay, I'm going to do a spring marathon. But in between, like the training plan, when the fall race ends and then the next training plan begins, there's like very little training actually happening, and they're losing a ton of fitness in this time and durability, but they're losing a lot of what they built. And then they literally are starting from almost square one, back the beginning and building up again. Whereas if they had, and we'll talk about this a little bit, but it's like, well, if they'd had the consistency in between, even if they weren't doing a whole lot of intensity or following a progressive training plan, but they were just consistently running during that time and maybe doing little things here and there to maintain some fitness, sure, they would have maybe lost a little bit of what they had, but it wouldn't have been as much. And then when they started the next training plan, they would have be ahead of somebody else who maybe taken that time off. So I think that's, yeah. And I think that's something you mentioned. So I don't know if you want to kind of follow up on that with
Yeah,
some more thoughts too, but
I think I want to dial in this idea of performance that I've been talking about,
right.
and the
Okay.
difference between fitness and performance. And a prerequisite to performance is durability and consistency. Um, Now, when I say performance, I mean sustained performance, not one-off performance. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not that we finished the race and we performed at a certain level, and you're just like, okay, great, I got that. Well, my question to you then becomes, well, then what are your expectations for the next one? Do you expect to now start from square zero and you completely disregard the performance that you had before, or do you expect to become better, whether that means faster or stronger than you were in the one that you just completed? Well, in order to build on that experience, that's where this durability comes into play. But if you're just talking about one off performance here and there, then yeah, then there's really no difference between fitness and durability, because the performance is it's like I said, it's a one off thing. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not this building process where we're building off of the previous one. So, and your diagram that you alluded to, if you look at it in terms of a line graph, a person with durability is going to have an upward trend in that line over time. The It's not linear and it's not smooth, like you
Right.
said.
It's kind of
So
a little
it goes up
bumpy.
and down,
Yeah.
and sometimes there's a reversion. So it goes back a little bit and then goes forward up. But over time, in general, there's an upward slope or an upward trajectory of this performance. Now, somebody who has low durability, and whatever the reason for that is, um, the trend that you see is a lot less pronounced. It may be actually just a flat line
Mm-hmm.
where they're just almost maintaining, but there's so much volatility in that. So big ups and big downs and these huge swings. And what I found is that just leads to frustration and burnout. And eventually the person's just not going to enjoy that process, because they're going to constantly feel like, oh, I'm always starting over. I
Mm-hmm.
always have to go back. I can never build on what I've already gained and built. And there's that whole rebuild cycle, and it's really, really frustrating. And it
Yeah.
just
True.
leads, most of the time, you just quit
And
and you just find something else to do.
I think you're kind of referring to somebody that's um like another example, like just there's one example of people who kind of do the training plan and then maybe lose motivation. And then there's the other example of the people who really want to continue to train, but kind of they understand what we're saying, but they for some reason are just more susceptible to like injury,
Hmm.
or they're maybe there's just something they're not quite getting right in their training, the way they're thinking about the training plan, or it's not necessarily their fault, but they're keep kind of having these like more significant setbacks, where maybe somebody does actually want to be durable or make progress over time, but they just keep getting this nagging injury or something like
Yeah.
that that's kind of bringing them down and forcing them to take time off and start from square one. And I think that's really where the burnout probably happens for a lot of people, because injury is so prevalent in endurance sports. And I think that's kind of where maybe, having that discussion of, we'll kind of talk about like how to think about durability and building it, and where people kind of get it wrong a little bit. But I think that's probably more the case is, and maybe also why people kind of, I think a lot of people, like, the argument is, like you've kind of alluded to this, if I run more than 3 days a week, I'll get injured, because maybe in the past they have followed a training plan that was 5 or 6 days a week or something, or that's their experience is having done these training plans that maybe they found online or they've just been following, and it's that because they don't have the durability, they following the training plan, um and they're getting injured. And so their perception is, I can only, if I run any more than 3 or 4 days a week, I'm going to get injured. And then maybe somebody's coming at with us with that sort of, I don't know, arguments. And I think that's could be, potentially valid, but I think it's probably because there's something within the training, the way that they've gone about the training plans in the past, with like this consistently, yeah, like progressive overload, which does, yes, technically that is sort of the way to build training plans. But for somebody who's very susceptible to injury, that person may have to kind of go about things a little bit differently. And sometimes following those standard training plans isn't just going to work for them, because they might have to be a little bit more patient with how they're building and getting in the consistency. They might not, whereas a more genetically gifted person, or there's people who are just able to tolerate a little bit more and build volume quicker, and they just tend to be able to absorb that better and not get injured. And unfortunately, there are both types of people. So some people might be like, hey, I'm just durable, from the get go. I was always able to do it. And then there are people that are just more susceptible to injury. So I think there's a difference between those two. And somebody who's maybe just genetically able, or just because of their biomechanics or whatever is going on with them, they're able to handle more. They're able to kind of do those types of training plans and have good progress over time. And so I think it gets frustrating for those other individuals that are just more susceptible to setbacks and injury, because they're seeing that, somebody else is progressing and they're on a standard training plan, and they're like, why can't I do that? So
Yeah.
I think that's kind of also where some of that pushback comes in. Like, oh, if I do run more than this amount, I get injured. I think it's just more likely the way people are going about the training is not the frequency so much, as maybe the way that they're setting up their training plan and their expectations that they have to be able to have similar results to maybe somebody else who just happens to be more durable, maybe because they do have better genetics or better biomechanics. Or someone like me, I think, I've been running for so long, I might have more durability naturally, but I've also been running for a long time, and I built it over time. So if somebody's looking at what I'm doing and thinking, oh, I need to set my training plan up like that, like somebody who maybe doesn't have the durability will probably get injured more frequently, or
Yep.
have more issues. So I think that's, something I want to mention as well, kind of bring into the discussion.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Because if and we are a good example of that, because if I tried to follow your training plan, there's no way that I would be able to sustain that kind of volume. I don't have the durability that you have. So if I were to see your performance and follow whatever plan that you are, does the plan work? Yeah, it works for you and your characteristics and your durability, but it's not plug and play. So it's not like I can just go in and say, okay, that worked for her, I'm going to use that plan. I'd be hurt in just a matter of a couple weeks.
Right.
I don't have that ability, even though I consider both of us to be fit, but I don't have the same level of durability in that particular sport that you do. So
Mhm.
that I think that's one of these things where you find these training plans online and they're just kind of template cookie cutter plans. And yeah, does it work for a certain segment of the population? Yeah, and that's why these coaches are using these plans, and they're trying to sell these plans. It's like, oh, I've had big success with
Right.
all these athletes, but that is a fairly small segment of the population that can actually sustain that type of approach. It doesn't work for everybody, which is
It
why
takes a it takes a
I don't really support that kind
yeah,
of
it takes
method.
a
But
skilled person to be able to take a like somebody who's has a lot of experience in running, for instance, or just training, to be able to take a cookie cutter plan that's online and be able to like tailor it to themselves and know themselves well enough to be like, well, I know once I get past this volume, I can't really maintain that. So I'm only going to do this, or I need to take a cutback week more often where I kind of have a deload week, or, just knowing that, or knowing when you're starting to see that maybe that training plan is too much, and being able to kind of like make an adjustment. That takes a lot of experience. A lot of people don't have that, and they're like, I've got to follow this plan. They have a plan and they're like, I've got to follow it to the T, because a lot of us are also like perfectionists a little bit, or when we have something we're set out to do, we don't want to fail at it. So I think that also kind of gets in our way a little bit. And also like mentioning that training plan, I think like most training plans, there is like that progressive overload. So like the training progresses either in intensity or volume kind of somehow week over week. And then there is usually some training plans do have some deload weeks, or they have like a taper week or two before the race. And but I also think if you're more injury prone, I'm not sure. I'm trying to think of like how you would still be able to utilize a plan like that. But I think like your lead into it, you're just gonna have to be like, I wouldn't choose a plan if you have, let's say, a marathon in the fall. Like, you probably actually want to start thinking about how you're going to like lead into that marathon like now. Like, let's say you
Yeah.
have Chicago. Like, you need to be doing a plan of some sort that starts like some sort of very small progression. It might be like
Foundational.
slow foundational, like,
Yeah.
but also like the progression may be slower. Like, that 10% rule may not really work for you. So it's probably best, honestly, if you're starting that training plan now, May. Because then you have May, June, July, August, September. That gives you like 5 months to slowly build and maybe have some really easy runs, foundations before you maybe build your volume up before you add any intensity, and like kind of being really careful with it. Versus I think sometimes people, they're like, my rate, it's not till October. They kind of kick the can down a little bit. Maybe they're
Yeah.
still running a little bit, but you kind of, for something like that sort of type of race, you really do need to like be thinking about it much, much more in advance. And really, like, for a fall marathon, you should be starting now, honestly. So I think it's also
Mhm.
just the way kind of people approach it, because there are a lot of like 12, even I've seen 8-week training plans, or 12 weeks, but I would caution sort of against that too, because I think those types of training plans tend to be a little bit more aggressive. And for somebody who is a little bit more susceptible to setbacks, or doesn't seem to have the durability, or even just like, another suggestion might be is to actually focus a bit more, have almost like a real focus of durability, instead of like
Mhm.
signing up for something, but just giving your time like, okay, I'm going to really focus on becoming more durable for a while. And that doesn't mean you don't do races, but maybe you're just understanding that the races, you're maybe not going to have the time, your time may not get that much improved, but you're actually just focusing on a period of time where you work on your durability, and then kind of go into, another race to see if that helps, so actually like, this is a focus, and we'll talk a little bit how to do that, but that's another,
Mhm.
anyways, a couple more thoughts, but
Yeah. So I think if we had to come up with a pretty solid definitional difference between what fitness and durability is, we could say that fitness is your cardiovascular, metabolic, or structural, muscular endurance, that capacity. So it's going to be how fast you can run or how far that you can run. Durability is replicability. How often can I replicate that performance over time? I think that that is a pretty solid way to look at the difference between when we talk about fitness versus durability is, okay, it's not on how fast and how far I can run. It's how often can I repeat that performance over time.
Mhm.
That's what durability is.
Right.
So we'll progress this. So we've talked a little bit about maybe improper training plans, and this is where athletes start to really get kind of make these mistakes within their process. Um, I would completely agree with you that I think that there is this tendency to just jump from training plan to training plan and really what I find to be the most important aspect is that time between training plans. It's definitely something that I've been toying with myself this year, based on my experience that I had last year with Florida, and just the miserable experience that I had despite the training actually going really, really well. I found that, I had an expectation or a goal that I wanted to do another full Ironman by the time I turned 50. Well, I turned 49 this year, and I don't see an Ironman in the next 12 months, because I've quickly realized that I still don't have the durability that I need or want in order to perform based on my expectations. Could I survive one? Yeah, but I don't want to just survive. I want to perform. Um, it's too big of a deal to just say, "Oh, I survived it and I finished." That's not what I want for myself. So this year, I had to kind of take a step back and say, I'm not going to do another 70.3 this year, even though I really, really want to. My ego says, "Well, you did a 70.3 last year. You survived it. You're getting back. So let's keep pushing forward. Let's continue to push, push, push." But I know that there's going to come a time where I just push too much and it takes me over the edge. And I have to find a way to break this rebuild cycle. And the reason that I came up with this idea, this rebuild, this perpetual uh, ramp up, injury, PT recovery, start back over again. And it's because I've lived it. I've lived it over the past several years of every time I try and rebuild my run, I get to the point where I'm really happy with it, and then something happens, and then I have to take a step back again. And it's really just frustrating because I know that I'm capable to do this. So I really had to take a step back and take off my athlete hat and put on my coaching hat and say, if I were this person's coach, what would I tell them? And I'm talking to myself here. What would I tell myself if I were the coach? Because I am. And what I had to tell myself is like, look, you don't have the durability to do this based on the expectations that you have for yourself and the performance that you want from this process. Could you survive it? Yes, but it's not meeting your expectations, and, it's suffering. So what are we going to do about it? Well, what we're doing about it is we're now sacrificing the now in order to have a chance to go after it in the future. And that is a hard, hard pill to swallow as an endurance athlete. That means that really this year I have to find a way to sustain a minimum of 4 runs a week, and do that in order to build that durability to go into the next training cycle, not hoping that I can maintain 4 runs a week, but knowing that I can. That it's really, really hard to do, because I'm an A-type personality and I want to see progression and I want to see growth. And sometimes it's hard to take a step back and say, I'm just not getting what it is that I want out of this. I'm not giving up, but I need to delay this process and find a way to lay a better foundation so that I can build on top of it. Because right now I don't have that. And what we find is that these athletes will go from training plan to training plan, and once they finish one, it's like they're done, and they just kind of they start either doing stuff that they want to do and stuff that they sacrificed, which I completely understand. And I encourage my athletes to do that as well.
Right.
Once we finish a big race, let's kind of deload a little bit. I know there's stuff that you wanted to do that we didn't have the time in the training plan to do. So let's spend the next 2 to 3 weeks doing that kind of stuff, but we're going to stay active. But we have to put a limit on it because we have to start laying the foundation again for the next cycle, so that we're not starting this training plan actually further behind than where we were when we finished the last one.
Mhm.
We really want to try and maintain where we left off to go into the next one so that you can build on what you accumulated before.
And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to
It's
maintain
not
at
like
the
this
same
perpetual training.
volume.
Yeah.
No,
Right.
you're decreasing the volume to a point where you're kind of in maintenance mode, right? So for me, as an example, if my max volume is for a marathon is 70 miles a week, I might be cutting back to 30 or 40 a week during my maintenance phase, but I also like there's other things I'm also doing to maintain durability, which we'll talk about, which is like at that point I might be decreasing my volume of running, but I'm doing more strength training
Yeah.
or other activities like some sort of cross training or something to kind of im- maybe work on weakness, which or build back up strength, which I lose during, so certain things like that. There's like a different focus, but my focus does, I think, I've never really thought about this in this way, but my focus during that time in between is just to maintain or build on my durability so that I get to the next, start of my next training, cycle for the next race or whatever I'm doing, kind of already fairly durable. I could build on it again.
Yeah.
And I may not, at this point in my time, I may not be going much past that particular volume. I'm not maybe always building on that, 70 miles a week and going above and beyond that, but there's other things I'm doing, to get faster. And also maybe even in that in between time, I'm working on speed or certain things that are just gonna like be making my durability or just general foundational things that I'm doing. But yeah, I'm not like, oh, I'm done with my training. Now I'm gonna just take the next 3 months almost completely off because I have all these other things I need to do. Like it's always a part of my life, the training, but I have less like far more time to do stuff. I just have to keep up. You have to kind of think about it that way. But yeah, I agree with you. It's I don't know. Sometimes I think it's that, or sometimes I think, like I mentioned before, it's people truly getting injured and having to start from square one. And then when they're ready to, when they're not, their injury is no longer, they then pick a new training plan, right?
Yeah.
And they haven't thought about what you're thinking about of like, I actually want to do this and finish it, but not just finish it, but I want to be able to do this and like do it well. Um, I think especially if someone's injury prone, the last thing I would recommend somebody do is just like pick up another training plan once their injury goes away and just start all over again with a new training plan. It's almost like a recipe for repeating the same, you know what I mean? Like instead,
Yeah, absolutely.
do exactly kind of what you're thinking of like, okay, what do I need to actually do to sort of build this durability so that when I do start a training plan again, um, I can actually complete the training plan. I can actually not get injured. I can do the whole training plan, or maybe they're maybe thinking about being smarter about the training plan, but they're able to actually like do it, complete it. Versus I think that's the other thing is like that injury cycle I think happens a lot because somebody just takes the time off to heal an injury and then they're jumping right back into another training plan that they haven't actually thought out, well, why did I get the injury in the first place? And it's probably is something to do with, there's probably, who knows? I mean, it's every injury is different and what the cause of it is, but sometimes it could be just that lack of durability that they have that they could probably work on. So that's my other thought too, is
Yeah.
that. So, what do you think? Like, I think we talked a lot about, that background of like what's durability versus fitness. I'm curious, like we sort of alluded to it, but the building of the durability, like, I don't know what if you have an athlete that comes to you and they're like, I want to really work on my durability. I want to have a better foundation so that I can build from there. Like, how would you sort of go about like creating something or working with that person to help them?
Yeah. So I think that the first step that I would go through with that athlete is I would have to start from the strength side of it. So do some kind of evaluation on their mobility and muscular endurance and strength. To me, that's the foundation that we have to have in order to overlay the aerobic component on it in order to be consistent. So what I would typically do is give the person a very minimal plan, aerobic plan. So let's say let's just for simplification, let's just say I'm training a runner, um, because it's easier to talk about than training a triathlete because there's too many moving parts. But let's just say I'm working with a runner, and I would say, let's just say that this runner comes to me and says, hey, I'm already running like 2 to 3 times a week. and I want to work on durability so that I can run 4 to 5 times a week. What do I do? Well, the way that I would approach it is I would still keep their same run volume right now. I wouldn't change a thing when it comes to that. So if they're running 3 days a week, we keep those 3 days a week. I may evaluate how they've been running those 3 days a week. If they're overloading those 3 days and they're running too much in a single session, that's where I would start and reset and say, this is why you can't run 4 or 5 days a week, is because you're running too much 3 days a week. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut this back, let's say 75 to 75% of what it is that you're doing. So we're going to remove 25% of your total run volume from the plan right now. And then use that, either replace that 25% with a little bit of cross training or something like that, so that you can still get a little bit of an elevated heart rate, but remove the impact. But then the bigger part of the training plan is going to be the strength side. And I'm not just going to have them just go in and just say, okay, we're doing push days, we're doing pull days, and we're doing some legs. So what I mean by push days, these are things where it's like we're talking about, chest and triceps. Pull days are going to be back and biceps. So, and then the legs. What I may do is I would probably focus on areas that I know are going to be weaker, that are relevant to the sport that they are interested in doing. I think that there is a benefit to just general overall fitness and strength. Yes, I think that is a valuable piece. I think that comes more into play in those periods between training plans than it does actually within a structured training plan for a particular event. If we're just going to work on just building overall strength, that's when we reserve the time for that. But if we're in an active plan where we're training for a particular event, I'm going to focus on those strength movements that are pertinent to their sport. So a lot of the time that I'm going to have them focus on is building their glutes and their calves. Those tend to be the two weakest parts that a typical runner who would come to me is like, I'm struggling. That's where we see the most weakness. So, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to spend a whole lot of time in the weight room, but we will do some strength, because I'm not going to require them to join a gym if they don't have that kind of access. But there are things that we can do outside of the gym that will still replicate it. It doesn't necessarily, it's not a perfect substitute, but I think that there are some reasonable gains that we can make using that approach. So we're talking about glute bridges, hip thrusts, some banded clams and things like that will improve the engagement of the glutes and hips. Because really what we find is that if I have somebody coming to me saying, my knees really hurt. Well, a lot of the time it's not a structural problem with the knee unless they come to me. It's like, hey, I have a torn meniscus. That's why my knee hurts. Okay, well, yes, then you have a problem with the knee. But if they're running and they say my knees hurt, then really my first place that I go to is I want to see you run, and I want to look at the way that the glutes are engaging while they run. And most of the time what I find is that there's an asymmetry in glute engagement. So one glute doesn't fire like the other one does, which is why you have this imbalance in your gait, in which why, maybe one knee hurts, but the other one doesn't. That's the reason why. It's something that's further up the chain and it presents somewhere else. What I also find is that people who run a lot on the treadmill, and I'm susceptible to this as well because I absolutely love the treadmill. And then they have a race that they want to do that's not on a treadmill. It's going to be outside on the road. When they start to say, well, I need to get off the treadmill and I need to run the road because my race is on the road. And then they come to me, it's like, man, my ankles are absolutely killing me. I can't figure this out. And what's going on is the treadmills are flat. But when you run on the road, no road is flat. The way that they design roads is that they're cambered in order for drainage, so that water doesn't pool up on the road. But what it may be just a very, very slight angle that you may not even perceive it, but there is some angle there. So every time that foot makes contact with the ground, it's making it an angle. So it's not flat. And so when you lack that strength in your ankles, that repetitive motion is what causes the stress. And that's what's going to cause things like Achilles tendonitis. It's going to cause things like posterior tibial tendonitis and anterior tibial tendonitis, any kind of structural weakness in that ankle. And so we're going to do things like banded ankle mobility. So we put a band around the feet and we push our feet outward, and then we move the band, and then we do them inward. We'll do dorsiflexion and reverse like calf press in order to strengthen the shins. So we work on a lot of ankle mobility and ankle strength, and then glute strength. Those are the two things that I would recommend most runners to focus on a consistent basis, even while they're running. They just have to be cautious about the intensity in which they do train those muscles if they are in like a peak phase of their training plan. So if their volume is really, really high, or they've got a lot of intensity because they've now entered into the race specificity phase of a training plan, then you might need to cut back on the intensity in which you train those muscles in the weight room. But during the build phase, absolutely, you can still continue to work on that strength. You have to be careful on where it is that you place them within training plans. You don't want to put them, the day before a long run, or the day before, a quality session, or on the same day of a quality session. If you want to do lower body work, then you can do it on a day where you have a nice, easy recovery run. And I would do the run first rather than doing the weights first. So if I have an athlete that comes to me and says, hey, I want to work on durability, that's how we approach it. We will most likely decrease their run volume, replace it with maybe a little bit of cross training, and really focus on that strength. And as we start to build, then I will slowly introduce more volume on the run side. And what I would do is, rather than make those run sessions longer, I would introduce that fourth day before I would increase the duration of the workouts themselves. Right. So I may keep the volume constant in terms of minutes or miles, but increase the frequency. But that's going to mean that when I add that fourth day, I have to decrease the duration or miles of the existing 3 days that we had. Let's say that we were running 3 days a week, and we had a total of 15 miles that we ran for a week. So that means that each run was a 5-mile run. In order to introduce that fourth day, I don't want to now just add another 5-mile run, because that's going to overload the body. Now I've increased weekly volume too much. What I will do is, rather than have them run 5 miles for those 3 sessions, I would drop it down to, let's say, 3 miles per session, and then use that volume that I cut out. And that's how I would add that fourth day. And once we establish that fourth day, we then cover that for actually a few weeks. If we're not short on time, I know that tends to be kind of a limiter. If we're coming into a particular race and we just don't have a whole lot of time to do that, what would be beneficial is like, let's keep this here for 4 weeks, because it takes the body anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks to build adaptation to volume, for it to completely absorb it and be able to increase effectively. So these training plans where they're increasing week over week, it's not realistic to think that you can do that in perpetuity, because just because you ran, you ran 15 miles one week doesn't mean that you can run 18 miles the next week. Doesn't mean that your body is ready for that. Even though that increase in volume, the body can absorb a certain part of it, a fraction of that, and you can do that for a short amount of time. You can't do it for very long. So allow the body the time to really absorb it, really build that adaptation, and turn it into foundation. Once you turn it into foundation, they say, okay, now we're going to start increasing the volume of the individual workouts. And we may distribute that volume differently. rather than making all the runs the same, we'll start to then work on the mix and make one run like your long run, and then have a couple short runs and then a moderate run. So we just break up the distribution that way. So that's how I would approach uh, that scenario.
Right. Yeah.
That's kind of a
It's
long
okay.
explanation. Sorry.
I mean, I get what you're saying though. It's kind of it makes sense, like that kind of cautious building in one thing at a time, almost like you're kind of maybe starting with like the strength piece, and kind of once you have that established, you're like, okay, we're just going to do the whatever you were doing, but we're kind of being careful about the volume, maybe decreasing that a little bit, adding in the strength first, getting that established, and then maybe working on figuring out how to add an additional, day into the running, but, not adding in more volume with that day. But then once that frequency is increased, then increasing the volume. So it's like one sort of variable at a time cautiously. It's
Yes.
not like, I think a lot of tendency for people is to add a lot of variables in at once, like both strength and frequency and this other thing, or and we sort of talked about this off when before we started was um I don't know, I also think it's within, like, let's say you're trying to work towards 4 days a week of running, like within that there each day is going to have maybe like a slightly different purpose. There may be like one slightly longer run, maybe one sort of fartlek or some sort of speed play of some sort, speed interval of some sort, maybe one maybe an easier day or two, or another day where there's like a tempo or something kind of like of that nature. Eventually adding in again, and that's intensity. So like you kind of have to like then be careful once you kind of get to a volume you want, then maybe you're thinking about intensity. Um, because that is another variable. But I think what people tend to do is be like, oh, I have 4 days that I can run a week. And they seem to think like more intensity is better.
Mhm.
This is another mistake I see people making. And I think even in that sort of plan that you're describing, like I would have to really caution an athlete to be like, hey, these days, like the purpose of the day needs to be the purpose of the day. Like
Right.
the longer run needs to be easy. We're not going intense on all of these days, because I think there is this, especially if there's still 3 days that they're not running, maybe. So they do have some. So maybe those particular days eventually there is a little bit more intensity in some of those days than a plan that maybe has 5 or 6 days of running in it. But at the same time, we don't need to go hard every day. And I do think that's another mistake people make, is kind of like, oh, adding in a lot of intensity each day to try to get their fitness better. And unfortunately, that is a lot of stress on the body. It's like I was mentioning this, like I think part of it is just, I don't know where that comes from, because the other flip side, you still have this like 80/20 sort of mentality. It's like either or, all intensity or no intensity. It seems like nobody seems to be able to get this quite right sometimes. I think like I'm online sometimes when I'm on the treadmill or whatever, watching like YouTube videos, and it's always like I was just describing like Clayton Young. I was watching his sort of build up to Boston, but all they're showing on on these videos is like are his like track workouts, his
Mhm.
hard intense days. Like they're showing what's interesting, right? Like they're not going to generally probably just show him like, I mean, some of the clips were just from like him running or whatever, but most of it was like taken on the hard workouts when the coach is there and they're doing like some sort of interval or something really intense. And I think the perception I think somebody might have when watching that, if they didn't know that the nuance of running, like Clayton's not doing those workouts every day. Like he's brought a lot of probably easy running in between all of this. That's how he's getting 120 miles a week. There's no way he's doing those workouts every day, but that's what we're seeing.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so I think people sort of then perceive like, oh, I've got to be doing this like crazy, like Instagram worthy or Strava worthy workouts every day. I go out and I train. And that's definitely a recipe, I think, for disaster. And you're not really building durability. Kind of goes back to that, well, sure, you might be able to get fit, but you're going to end up, burning out or something. So I think that's also the thing to remember is that, again, it's not a comparison trap. Sometimes what we see online and what other people are doing isn't the whole picture of what they're doing. Like it's just a little snapshot, a very small 10-minute video snapshot of their training, which isn't they're going to only show the interesting bits. So I think it's just important really to keep that in mind. Like it is um the sort of slow sometimes the slow easy running and just being out there and kind of that's kind of also where you build, I think, some of that durability, because the it's the harder faster running that puts you at more risk of injury generally. So like you do
Right.
have to kind of put in some of those like just general easy running to get more durable also. Like that's a piece of it. So I think that's something I just want to add. I mean, I also think when I'm working with someone, if someone's coming to me and they're sort of saying like, I don't feel like I'm durable enough, or they have an injury history, I'm also sort of going to be asking about, yeah, like how intense are their workouts, but also like how is their fueling? Obviously, as a
Yeah.
dietitian, that's like a big piece of it. A lot of people come to me actually because they want to sort of combine the fueling aspect with the training. And you obviously have a unique ability to sort of look at both of those things. And sometimes it is truly like other stuff going on that's kind of getting in the way of their durability. Like they're not sleeping well, and obviously then they're not recovering, and that's putting them
Mm.
more susceptible, or they're under eating. I see this a surprising amount of time, especially more so, I would say, with like female athletes, kind of like this under fueling piece, which is unfortunate, but it happens, and that may be what's impacting them. So I also think kind of looking at the training, but outside of the training as well, would be one thing I would want to add to that. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
that's all
I
I've
think
got.
that I think that the social media thing is valid. I think that that is a big piece of that puzzle. Um, and I mean, I admit that I've done that myself. You know, if I watch clips of triathletes and they're dripping wet and they're like on the bike and they're on the trainer and they're pushing, hundreds and hundreds of watts, and it's just like, is that something that I should be doing? And I find myself asking myself that, and it's like, no. I mean, there's a time and place for that. Am I there? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know, but it's not something that I need to be consistently doing on a
Right.
regular basis. There's a time and place for it, and there has to be a purpose behind it. Another thing that I think is a big driver, and the reason I think this is because I find myself going here, is they go into each workout with some kind of minimum performance metric already in mind. And let's say that it's like some like if it's a runner, they have a goal race pace that they want to hit, and they have been building up in order to maintain that race pace for some small fraction of time, and that's how we build that adaptability. And then they go into every single run trying to match their best performance that they've gotten so far in training, and they immediately try and validate that race pace goal by trying to sustain that pace in training.
Hmm.
And what they're doing is they're increasing the duration in which they're holding that pace. But one what I find is that if they are faced with a situation where they have to decrease their pace because this is either going to be an easy run or we've stacked on too much fatigue, so we got to take a roll back, what happens is that they now perceive that this decrease in speed or pace is some indication that they are regressing and not progressing. So they go into every single workout with some minimum pace in mind, and that if they don't hit that, then their training plan isn't any good, or they're losing fitness, they're not progressing quickly, or they're getting weaker, they're getting slower, where in fact not all runs should be done at the same pace. And it's something that I've had to reinforce in my own mind as well. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here. So when, even during my warm-ups, I've had to tell myself, look, it's okay to be in zone 1 for your warm-up, because the way that I would approach my warm-up is I would immediately go into zone 2, even though I know better, because I would perceive that as like, oh, well, I don't need to run in zone 1 because I'm stronger than that. In my own mind, I'm stronger than that. And that if I have to go into zone 1, then I'm now not making progress like I should be or that I want to be. So I immediately jump into zone 2, which is too high for a warm up. And so then I now sabotaged the quality segments of my run because I didn't do what I was supposed to do in the warm up.
Right.
And so I find that
Yeah.
this is one of the things that a lot of
that-
athletes are doing is
yeah.
this perception of regression and progression and really breaking their reliance on some kind of performance metric to evaluate where they are right now to tell them if they're on the right trajectory on where they want to be in the future.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's interesting because I think people do, like, maybe they're not actually following a training plan like they should if they're doing that, because it's usually most training plans will have some sort of goal for the warm up and then each segment, like I want you to run faster than race pace, or I want this one to be slower than, and if they're like, oh no, I'm just going to do whatever, then they're obviously not following a plan that's thought out. The other thing, kind of going along that, I do see myself kind of susceptible to this because I'm usually pretty good about like warming up and following the prescription of the day or whatever, but because I have made the mistake in the past of like taking my easy runs too fast because I wanted to be a hero. But I do think like I do have to blame Strava here. I got to point out Strava a little bit. I know you're not really on Strava, so it's like a social media app thing for a lot of runners, cyclists use it. But I have a tendency sometimes is you bring up the warm up, like I want my like especially my workout days, I could care less about my easy days. Honestly, I really just don't care. But for some reason, like on my workout days, I want it to look fast,
Mm-hmm.
And so I do sometimes have a tendency when I'm warming up to be like, oh, this pace is too slow. My average is going to be slower, and it won't look like I'm like going, I won't look impressive or something. And that happens to me too sometimes. And I have to remind myself that that's not my goal, is to impress people on Strava. Like that shouldn't be like my goal. Cause if that's my goal, I can do that, but I'm not going to be able to like then maybe also have the goal of having a good marathon. Cause I feel like maybe that's somebody's sole goal is to just be impressive on Strava, but that's probably going to be counterproductive to whatever race goal you have. So I do think it's easy, because I think that sometimes happens to me, and I've been running for a long time, and I kind of have had some things that have happened to me that learning experiences along the way that makes me you feel like I've kind of got that down a little better, and I still am susceptible to those things. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really hard, and I to not to fall into that trap. But I really encourage you to, not do that. I don't know, like it's hard, but like to take the easy run easy, to do the workout, to not be like, oh, I have to kind of see where I'm at, like where I'm at compared to my goal race pace, and then go out too hard because you're trying to see if you can maintain some sort of race pace for longer or something. Because that will come. We'll have those workouts where you're going to do that type of thing, but that shouldn't be like happening frequently. Anyway, so I agree. I think it's just things to think about is I think today's day and age, with social media, with things like Strava, it is so hard because we constantly have this comparison trap of what other people are doing. And then, I mean, and even then it's like, the volume thing. I feel like I hear a lot of runners doing high volume, and I do sometimes think, oh, maybe I need to run more. And it's like, oh, no, like I just need to stay in my focus and in my goal and what I know I can do. Because if I try to do more, I might get injured. And that's, but it's so hard, I think. And I just want to point that out, that I think, like you said, Justin, and for myself too, I do sometimes fall. I think I catch myself usually, but I'm still susceptible to some of those comparison traps. We're dealing with more just more inputs, right? Whereas before years ago, or even before really social media took off, we didn't have all these things to compare ourselves to. And now it's everywhere. So it's hard. And
it's like every workout is now become a race validating workout.
Well, not only for yourself, but for like everyone, to show to everyone else
Right.
out there that
Yeah. So it's like,
you're capable of what you're, trying to,
yeah, I'll go into it, and it's just like if I look at my pace, and then I'll evaluate how I feel at that pace, and it's just like then I start to question. It's like, man, this is hard to maintain. How am I going to do this on race day? And now this starts that ball rolling, and it's just like, oh well, now I'm behind, and maybe my goals are out of reach, so I have to prove to myself that this is a realistic goal. And so now every single workout that I'm doing is now a validation of the realistic nature of my expectations for race day. And what that does is it sabotages race day, because now you're trying to have 7 race days in a week,
right? Yeah.
where
And then,
it
that's
defeats
gonna,
it. And so what it
that's
does
gonna
is
make
it will build fitness, absolutely, but at what cost does it build that fitness? So what you're doing is you're building fitness at the cost of durability, because it's only sustainable for so long, and then eventually the body just says, look, I've had it, I can't keep this up. You don't have the foundation to sustain these efforts, so you either fix it or I'm going to fix it for you. And we're usually not smart enough to fix it before our body fixes it for us, forces us to stop, which is now, so it's at the cost of durability.
It's a game of patience, I think. Like,
it absolutely is.
It's being, and that's why I really, really want people to think about it in terms of, there are, again, kind of going back to the original, like, shortcut sort of situation of, like, there are really no shortcuts to get there. Like, you can't really do sustainably 3 days a week and somehow, run like a PR, marathon maybe.
Right.
Like, it depends again where you're starting, but you can't, like, there's you have to put in work, and the work has to be very thoughtful. It's going to involve easy days and some harder days, and varying paces, and probably a lot of easy running, because you can't just do hard running every day like we just said. um and patience of, like, how you're building the each variable at one at a time, and sometimes having to hold steady somewhere for a few weeks before you put in another variable. It's just a matter of patience, and that's why I really encourage people to embrace, especially newer runners, to kind of think of this more as like a whole process, and it takes time. It's not, there are no shortcuts, so it's going to take time, and to really enjoy that part of it, of like,
Yeah.
enjoy each little piece of it, and how it's building slowly over time. Otherwise, if you're kind of if you're impatient and you want to kind of get to the end faster, and I guarantee you're going, most likely, unless you're extremely lucky in your ability to be durable, like you have a lot of good genetic factors there, most likely you're going to just be knocked down to square one again, and then so you're going to have that continue, make some progress, hit that, go backwards, and it does involve a lot of patience, and sort of, and kind of embracing that, and enjoying that, I think, is probably the best way to go forward, because otherwise, I think you're going to probably burn out and be disappointed.
The way I kind of, an analogy that I use to illustrate this is, let's say that you're interested in, your goal is to get a promotion at work. Well, are you going to get this promotion by having a meets expectation on your evaluation? The meets expectation is like running 3 days a week. You're doing the bare minimum. You're there when the office opens, and you're there when everybody goes home. So you work your 8 hours. You don't do anything extra, and you're just there to just do the job. Your chances of getting that promotion, i.e., your PR in your race, very, very minimal.
Mhm.
Now, what are your chances of getting this promotion if you say, well, I'm going to do the bare minimum all the time, but then I'm going to dedicate a whole month of we're doing all-nighters, and I'm going to do all this extra work, but I can only do that for a month. That's where you get this panic training, and we're going to swing way over here to the side, but it's not sustainable, and your bosses are going to see that that's not going to be a sustainable thing. So that's going from like the 3 days a week to the 7 days a week of running, thinking that that'll get you there. but you can't sustain it.
Hmm.
So the thing is that just finding a way to consistently perform and get to that point where you're exceeding somebody's expectations, then your chances of promotion increases. The same can be said for endurance sports. The playing the long game. This is a process that you have to build over time. There's going to have to be several evaluations where you kind of meet to exceeds your expectations. That's the way that I view this.
Right.
This
Yeah, that's a
approach.
good analogy, I think, to kind of finishes out on. Yeah, it's like the bare minimum versus like going an unsustainable direction. It's kind of
Yeah, you'll still
yeah,
get paid, but you
yeah,
won't get the promotion.
yeah,
So,
exactly. And if you do too much and you burn yourself out, and after a month you're having to take 2 weeks off because you're sick, or I don't know,
yeah,
that's not going to be your bosses aren't really going to like view that as super positive either. So it's kind of yeah, I like that analogy. It puts it in perspective a little bit of what it kind of takes.
yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like we could make a lot of money if we just had some sort of, the quick fix. Like, we just tell people, "This is how you do it. You run 3 days a week, and these are the things you do, and you're gonna be able to get your PR, and you're never gonna get injured." Yeah, but I mean, we would be lying to people if we would be selling snake oil, basically, if we were to say that, because there's no way to do that, but I mean, that's kind of what people wanna hear sometimes. Unfortunately, it's not the way it works.
yeah,
Well, anyway, I think we kinda covered that good. I don't know if you have any
yeah.
last minute thoughts.
I don't.
I
I
like your
think we've
analogy.
I think we've covered all the topics that I think that we needed to in order to illustrate this difference between fitness and durability, and
Yeah.
things to focus on, and what tends to be a waste of time. So I want to thank you guys for joining us for episode 93 of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast, where we talked about the difference between fitness and durability. We want to thank you guys for joining us. If you found this episode to be helpful to you, we hope that you will consider leaving a review and a comment. Those are greatly appreciated. If you know somebody else that you think this particular topic would be of service to them and would help them in their journey, I hope that you're comfortable enough to share this episode with them. And we want to extend the reach of this podcast. And we know from day one, we decided to not monetize it. So we don't have any sponsors or any ads or anything like that. So your comments and reviews and sharing episodes is how this podcast grows. And so I hope that you will feel comfortable enough to leave a comment and a review or share an episode with someone. Those are greatly appreciated. We also have the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast group. It's a private group on Facebook where we're growing out a community. We do push out some additional content to this group, but we really wanted to create this community from day one, from the very first episode that we had, where we wanted to have access to our listeners, because we felt that it was important that they have access to us as well, so that we can all grow and learn from each other. I want to know about topics that you find to be important that maybe we have not covered, or if you have a different perspective on something that we've talked about, share that within the group. See what we can learn from each other, because you may have a completely valid thought or an opinion that maybe I haven't considered or that Katie hasn't considered, and will lead to further discussion. Those are greatly appreciated. And, I think it will extend the learning experience. So we hope that you will just go out and search for the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast group on Facebook. You'll answer one simple question, agree to the group rules, and it lets you right on in. And so we want to thank you guys for that. We are active coaches, so we are bringing on athletes onto our rosters. If you are interested in coaching, you may be just super busy and you're tired of trying to figure out what you're going to do every week, or you have a new goal in mind, but you don't know how to approach it. Please reach out to us. We would love to talk to you. Do your due diligence in coaches, because it's important to find one that fits your lifestyle, fits your perspective, that you agree with their philosophy, and that you can buy into their method. Those are really, really important. but we hope that you will at least consider talking to us when you talk to others as well. So you can go to fuel2run.com for Coach Kitty. She does dietetics and run training. You can go to tabularasaracing.com. I do multi-sport and single sport training plans, and we would love to talk to you on how we can possibly help you along in your journey. So again, thank you guys for joining us with episode 93 of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. I've been your host, Coach Justin, along with Coach Katie, and we will talk to you guys again next time. That wraps up today's episode of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Endurance sports have a way of teaching us patience, humility, and resilience, lessons that carry far beyond the workout. Progress in endurance sports doesn't come from shortcuts. It comes from consistency, discipline, and doing the work when it's not glamorous. Wherever you are on your endurance journey, keep trusting the process and honoring the work you put in each day. If today's episode resonated, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone to help on their endurance journey. Don't forget to join the conversation on our social sites to help build and foster a community where we all learn and support one another. We'll be back with more stories and insights from Coach Justin and Katie. Until then, visit the podcast website at theenduranceathletejourney.buzzsprout.com for more episodes from the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Have questions or comments about the podcast? Feel free to send us an email at theenduranceathletejourney@gmail.com. For all things coaching, visit Coach Katie at fuel2run.com and Coach Justin at tabularasaracing.com. Again, thank you for listening to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast, and remember to find joy in the journey.